The old garage stood at the edge of town, a weathered monument to a bygone era, its faded blue paint peeled in places, revealing the wooden boards beneath that had withstood decades of harsh Idaho winters. A hand-painted sign reading Hank's Auto Repair hung slightly crooked above the entrance, the once bright letters now dulled by time and the elements. Inside, the walls were adorned with vintage tools, car parts, and photographs spanning nearly 50 years of business. Hank Dobson, the garage's 78-year-old owner and sole mechanic, wiped his grease-stained hands on a rag that had seen better days. His weathered face, etched with deep lines from years of squinting under car hoods and soaking up the sun, broke into a small smile as he assessed his work. Despite his arthritis and failing eyesight, his hands remained steady, the hands of a craftsman who had dedicated his life to his trade. The classic 1969 Porsche 911 he'd just finished working on gleamed under the fluorescent lights. It wasn't often that such a vehicle rolled into his modest shop, especially not one with an engine problem that had stumped 3 other mechanics in Boise. But Hank had a gift for listening to engines, for understanding the subtle language of machinery that most modern mechanics, with their computerized diagnostic tools, had never properly learned. The bell above the door jingled, pulling Hank from his thoughts. "All done?" asked the tall, lean man with shoulder-length dark hair who had brought the car in earlier that day. He wore simple jeans, boots, and a black t-shirt under a worn leather jacket, unassuming attire that gave no hint of the fact that he could afford such an expensive vehicle. "She's purring like a kitten now," Hank replied, patting the hood affectionately. "Found your problem. Wasn't the fuel injection like those other fellas thought. It was a hairline crack in one of the valve covers. Easy to miss if you're just looking at computer readings." The man approached, his movements fluid and graceful. There was something familiar about him, but Hank couldn't quite place it. Lots of fellas had that long-haired look these days. "I knew bringing it here was the right call," the man said, his voice warm with genuine appreciation. "My friend said you were the best, that you could fix anything with an engine." Hank chuckled, a sound like gravel shifting underfoot. "Well, I don't know about anything, but I've been doing this since before most of today's mechanics were born." They talked for a while about the car, Hank explaining what he'd done in technical detail, surprised when the owner asked informed questions that revealed a decent understanding of automotive engineering. Not many owners of luxury cars bothered to learn what was under the hood. When it came time to settle up, Hank pushed a handwritten bill across the counter. The man glanced at it and frowned. "This can't be right," he said, looking up at Hank. "It's way too low." "That's my standard rate plus parts," Hank said firmly. "Don't charge extra just because the car's fancy or because others couldn't fix it." The man seemed troubled by this but respected Hank's pride enough not to insist. Instead, as he handed over his credit card, he asked, "How long have you had this place?" "Coming up on 50 years this December," Hank replied, running the card through his ancient payment machine. "Started it after I got back from Vietnam. Needed something to focus on, something to build." As Hank handed back the card, he finally caught a glimpse of the name, Keanu Reeves. His eyes widened slightly, but he said nothing, maintaining his professional demeanor. If this man, movie star or not, wanted to be treated like a regular person, Hank would oblige. Everyone deserved that basic courtesy. "Thank you for your service," Reeves said sincerely, "and for fixing my car when no one else could." With that, he shook Hank's hand firmly, got into the Porsche, and drove away, the engine's powerful purr fading into the distance. Hank watched him go, then shrugged and went back to work on a local farmer's tractor. Celebrities needed their cars fixed too, he supposed. A week passed, filled with the usual parade of oil changes, brake jobs, and minor repairs that kept Hank's modest business afloat. He hadn't mentioned his famous customer to anyone, not even to his daughter, Linda, who called twice a week from Seattle to check on him. It wasn't his way to gossip, and besides, the man had just been another customer with a car problem. The following Thursday afternoon, Hank was struggling with the books, the part of the business he hated most, when the familiar jingle of the bell announced a customer. He looked up, surprised to see Keanu Reeves standing there again, this time dressed in a simple black suit. "Problem with the Porsche?" Hank asked, rising stiffly from his desk. No, she's running perfectly, Reeves replied with a small smile. I actually came to talk to you about something else. Do you have a minute? Hank gestured to the battered coffee pot in the corner. Always got time for coffee. They settled into the small waiting area, sitting in chairs that had been reupholstered multiple times over the decades. Through the large front windows, Hank could see a black SUV with tinted windows parked outside, likely the actor's transportation today. Mr. Dobson, Reeves began. Hank, the old mechanic corrected. Hank, Reeves nodded. I wanted to tell you that after I left here last week, I couldn't stop thinking about this place, about the work you do. It's rare to find someone with such dedication to their craft. Hank shrugged, uncomfortable with praise. Just doing what I know. That's exactly it. Reeves leaned forward, his expression earnest. You know your craft inside and out. You've mastered it. And I heard from some locals in town that you've been helping people here for decades, sometimes fixing cars for free when folks can't pay, giving young people jobs when they're struggling. Hank shifted in his seat. People talk too much. Reeves smiled. People remember kindness, especially consistent kindness over many years. There was a pause as they both sipped their coffee. Then Reeves continued. I've been fortunate in my career, and I try to use that good fortune to support craftspeople, artists, and people who make a difference in their communities. Hank raised a bushy eyebrow, not entirely following where this was heading. I'd like to help you expand your shop, Reeves said simply. Create a place where you could train young mechanics in the traditional skills that are being lost. A school of sorts, but also a working garage. I'd provide the funding, but it would be your vision, your knowledge. Hank stared at him, coffee cup frozen halfway to his lips. You want to give me money? To teach kids? I want to invest in what you know before it's lost, Reeves clarified. These old cars, these mechanical systems, fewer and fewer people understand them. Everything is computerized now, disposable. The art of diagnosis, of listening to an engine, of understanding how all the parts work together, that's becoming rare. Hank set his cup down carefully. Why? Why would you do this? Because what you do matters, Reeves said. And because when I brought my car here, you didn't see a celebrity. You didn't try to overcharge me. You just saw a person with a car problem. That kind of integrity is worth supporting. Hank was silent for a long moment, looking around his beloved, but admittedly run-down shop. The roof leaked in 3 places when it rained hard. The lift was from the 1980s and groaned ominously whenever he raised a vehicle. The heating system barely kept the place above freezing during winter. I've been thinking about retiring, he finally said. Arthritis makes it hard some days, and there's no one to take over. My daughter's a lawyer in Seattle, has no interest in cars. You wouldn't have to work as hard, Reeves suggested. You could focus on teaching, on the special cases that interest you. We could hire help for the routine jobs. Hank questioned. It would be a partnership, Reeves explained. I have a foundation that supports initiatives like this. They would handle the business side, but you would have complete authority over the garage operations and the teaching program. Hank rubbed his chin, leaving a smudge of grease, a permanent accessory after 50 years of mechanical work. I'd need to think about it. Of course, Reeves said, standing. He placed a business card on the small table between them. This is my manager's contact information. Take all the time you need. He shook Hank's hand again and turned to leave, but paused at the door. One more thing. I told a friend about your work on my Porsche. He has a 1957 Chevrolet Bel Air that no one has been able to properly tune. Would it be all right if he brought it by next week? Despite his shock at the preceding conversation, Hank couldn't help but feel a flicker of interest. A 57 Bel Air? Original engine? Reeves smiled. Completely original. He's very particular about it. Tuesday morning would be good, Hank said, his mind already working on the potential challenges such a classic might present. With a nod, Reeves departed, leaving Hank alone with a half-drunk cup of cooling coffee and a business card that might represent an entirely new chapter in his life. 3 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, Hank stood before the newly renovated and expanded Dobson Classic Auto Restoration and Training Center. The old Hank's Auto Repair sign had been carefully preserved and hung inside, but the building itself was transformed, nearly 3 times its original size, with modern equipment alongside lovingly restored vintage tools. Beside him stood Keanu Reeves, dressed as casually as he had been on that first day, hands in the pockets of his jeans as they surveyed the results of their partnership. "What do you think?" Reeves asked. Hank, never a man of many words, simply nodded. "It'll do." Reeves smiled, understanding the depth of approval behind the understated response. Inside, 5 eager apprentices, 3 young men and 2 young women, ranging in age from 18 to 24, waited for their first official day of training. They had been carefully selected from applications that poured in after word spread about the program. Full scholarships to learn classic automotive restoration from master mechanic Hank Dobson, with guaranteed job placement after completion. What none of them knew yet was that the unassuming man in jeans and a t-shirt standing beside their instructor was the program's benefactor. Keanu had insisted on keeping his involvement quiet, allowing Hank and the program to take center stage. "Ready to meet them?" Reeves asked. Hank straightened his new work shirt, which still felt stiff and too clean compared to his usual oil-stained attire. "Might as well get started. Engines don't fix themselves." As they walked inside, Hank reflected on the whirlwind of the past 3 months. After careful consideration and long talks with his daughter, who had been stunned to learn about his famous customer, he had accepted Reeves' proposal. What followed was an efficient but thoughtful renovation process, with Reeves's foundation handling the logistics while deferring to Hank on all matters related to the garage's functionality. The old mechanic had been shocked when Keanu himself appeared regularly to check on progress, sometimes rolling up his sleeves to help with the physical work of the renovation. He moved between the construction crews and Hank with equal ease, listening more than speaking, absorbing Hank's knowledge about garage layout and tool organization while offering practical suggestions from his own experiences. During those weeks, they had developed an unlikely friendship. Hank, who had never been impressed by celebrity, found himself respecting the actor's work ethic, his genuine interest in craftsmanship, and his lack of pretension. For his part, Reeves seemed to value Hank's straightforward nature and vast mechanical knowledge. Now, as they entered the main workshop area where the apprentices waited, Hank felt a mixture of nervousness and pride. He had never considered himself a teacher, but these past weeks of planning the curriculum had awakened something in him, a desire to ensure that the knowledge he'd accumulated over a lifetime wouldn't die with him. "Good morning," he said gruffly to the assembled young people. "I'm Hank Dobson. This is my friend," he hesitated, looking at Reeves. "John," Reeves supplied smoothly, using his given first name. "I'll be helping out occasionally." The apprentices nodded politely, clearly more focused on Hank as their primary instructor. None of them showed any sign of recognizing Reeves, either because of his subdued appearance or because they were simply too young to identify a movie star who had been famous since before they were born. "Right," Hank continued. "First thing you need to understand is that working on classic cars isn't just about fixing problems. It's about respecting the machine, understanding how all its parts work together, and preserving the engineering that went into it." His voice grew stronger as he spoke about his passion. "Modern cars will tell you what's wrong with a computer. Classic cars, you have to listen to them, feel them. They speak their own language." For the next hour, Hank walked the students through the shop, showing them the tools they would be using, both modern and vintage, and explaining the first project they would tackle together: the restoration of a 1962 Ford Thunderbird that had been donated to the program. Keanu observed quietly, occasionally asking questions that helped illuminate important points, skillfully playing the role of interested novice to draw out Hank's expertise for the benefit of the students. By the time they broke for lunch, the apprentices were clearly captivated by Hank's knowledge and excited about the hands-on work to come. As the students filed out to the break room, Reeves approached Hank. "You're a natural teacher," Hank snorted, "just talking about what I know." "That's what the best teaching is," Reeves replied. "I should get going. I have a flight this afternoon." "Back to Hollywood?" "Vancouver. Filming starts next week on a new project." Hank nodded, then hesitated before adding, Thanks again for all this. Never thought I'd be starting something new at my age. Reeves smiled, that gentle expression that had made him beloved to fans worldwide. Age is just a number, Hank. It's what we do with our time that matters. After Reeves departed, promising to check in regularly, Hank returned to the workshop to prepare for the afternoon session. As he arranged tools and reviewed his notes, he noticed one of the young apprentices, a girl named Maya, had returned early from lunch and was studying the engine of the Thunderbird. "Something on your mind?" he asked. She looked up, slightly startled. "Just wondering about the firing order for this engine. My grandfather had a '63 Thunderbird, but I never got to work on it before he sold it." Hank moved closer, pointing to the distributor. "On these models, it's 154263788, different from most other Ford V8s of the era." He looked at her appraisingly. "You know much about engines already?" "Some," she said. "My grandfather taught me the basics before he got too sick to work on cars anymore. That's why I applied to this program. I want to learn everything he didn't have time to teach me." Hank felt a familiar twinge in his chest, the echo of his own story. He had learned from his father, who had run a small service station decades ago. The knowledge had been passed down, hand to hand, generation to generation. "Well," he said, his gruff voice softening slightly, "we've got plenty of time for that now." As the other students began filing back in, eager to begin their hands-on work, Hank Dobson felt something he hadn't experienced in years. The satisfaction of knowing that his life's work would continue beyond him, that the craftsmanship he valued would not be lost. And it had all begun with a broken Porsche and a famous actor who had recognized the worth in an old man's weathered hands. 6 months into the program, the transformation was remarkable. The Thunderbird restoration was progressing beautifully, with each apprentice taking responsibility for different aspects of the project under Hank's watchful guidance. The regular repair business was thriving as well, with classic car owners driving from 3 states away to have their beloved vehicles serviced by Hank and his students. Keanu Reeves had visited twice more, each time arriving without fanfare, spending a day or two working alongside everyone else, learning and contributing. By his second visit, the students had finally realized who John really was, but following Hank's example, they treated him no differently than any other visitor to the shop. On a snowy December morning, as Hank was demonstrating the intricacies of carburetor rebuilding to 2 of his apprentices, the shop phone rang. Maya, who had proven herself not only mechanically gifted but also organized and efficient, answered it. "Dobson Classic Auto," she said professionally. "How can we help you?" She listened for a moment, her expression growing serious. "Yes, he's here. One moment, please." Covering the receiver, she called out, "Hank, hospital's on the phone. It's about Mr. Reeves." Hank wiped his hands and took the phone, his bushy eyebrows drawing together in concern. "This is Hank Dobson." The conversation was brief, with Hank mostly listening and asking a few short questions. When he hung up, he turned to Maya and the others who had gathered nearby, worry evident on their faces. "Keanu's been in an accident," he explained. "Motorcycle crash on the highway outside town. He's at St. Luke's. Nothing life-threatening, but he's banged up pretty good." "Was he coming here?" asked Derek, one of the younger apprentices. "Sounds like it," Hank said. "They found my business card in his pocket, which is why they called." Without hesitation, Hank grabbed his coat. "Maya, you're in charge till I get back. Keep working on the Thunderbird's electrical system. I'll call when I know more." The drive to the hospital took Hank through downtown Boise, now decorated for the holidays with strings of lights and wreaths adorning the lampposts. He parked in the visitor's lot, his old truck looking out of place among the newer vehicles. At the reception desk, he identified himself, his weathered face set in determined lines. "I'm here for Keanu Reeves. I'm his," he paused, then finished, "friend." The receptionist looked skeptical, but checked her computer. "Are you family?" "No, but I'm the closest thing he's got in Idaho," Hank replied firmly. "He was coming to see me when the accident happened." After a brief consultation with a nurse, he was directed to a room on the 3rd floor. Knocking softly, he entered to find Keanu propped up in a hospital bed, his left arm in a cast, butterfly bandages closing a cut above his right eye, and various scrapes and bruises visible on his face and neck. Hank, Reeves said, his voice slightly hoarse but warm with genuine pleasure. They called you. I wasn't sure they would. Of course they called me, Hank replied, pulling up a chair beside the bed. What happened? Black ice, Reeves explained simply. The bike went out from under me near the canyon. Could have been much worse if a trucker hadn't stopped to help. Hank nodded, knowing the treacherous stretch of road well. They say how long you're in for? Just overnight for observation. Broken wrist, mild concussion, nothing serious. Reeves shifted slightly, wincing. I was coming to surprise you. The program's 6-month anniversary. Hank felt a lump form in his throat, unexpected emotion welling up. This famous man, with all his commitments and responsibilities, had remembered such a detail and made a special trip, in December, on a motorcycle no less, to mark the occasion. Well, he said gruffly, covering his feelings, you sure surprised us all right. Reeves laughed, then grimaced as the movement jarred his injured body. Not quite how I planned it. Your manager know yet? Called him from the ambulance. He's arranging a car to pick me up tomorrow, get me to a private facility in L.A. Reeves sighed. Filming was just wrapped anyway. This won't impact any productions. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the hospital sounds creating a background hum around them. I brought you something, Reeves finally said, nodding toward a small duffel bag on the nearby chair. In the side pocket. Was going to give it to you today. Curious, Hank reached for the bag and unzipped the pocket, pulling out a small, carefully wrapped package. Opening it, he found a vintage mechanical watch, a Bulova from the 1960s, similar to one Hank had mentioned his father wearing during his childhood. How did you remember that? Hank asked, turning the beautiful timepiece over in his hands. He had only mentioned his father's watch once, during a casual conversation months ago. Reeves shrugged his good shoulder. You said it was one of your earliest memories, watching him check the time before opening the service station each morning. Hank carefully fastened the watch around his wrist, admiring how the light caught on its face. Thank you. This is... He trailed off, not quite finding the words. It reminded me of you, Reeves said simply. Mechanical, reliable, built to last. The old mechanic cleared his throat, emotion threatening to overwhelm him again. The students send their best, he said, changing the subject. They figured out who you are, by the way. I wondered when that would happen, Reeves said with a small smile. They've been very discreet. Told them how you wanted it, Hank explained. No fuss, no special treatment. How is everyone doing? How's Maya's project coming along? They spent the next hour talking about the program, the students, and the various restoration projects underway at the shop. Hank found himself speaking more than usual, filling Reeves in on all the details of their progress, surprised by how much had been accomplished in just 6 months. When a nurse came in to check on Reeves, Hank stood to leave. I should let you rest. Anything you need from town before you head back to California? Actually, Reeves said, looking slightly hesitant, I'd appreciate a ride from the hospital tomorrow, if you're not too busy, just to the private airfield outside town. The car service isn't available until late afternoon, and they want to discharge me in the morning. I'll be here at 9, Hank promised without hesitation. As he drove back to the shop through the gathering twilight, the Christmas lights of Boise twinkling around him, Hank Dobson reflected on the strange turns his life had taken. At 78, when many of his contemporaries were confined to rocking chairs or already gone, he was teaching a new generation, preserving a craft he loved, and somehow had become friends with one of the most famous actors in the world. The vintage watch on his wrist caught the light from the dashboard, its steady ticking a reminder of time passing, but also of things built to endure. Like friendship, like knowledge passed from hand to hand, like an old mechanic's legacy that would now outlive him. The following spring, as wildflowers bloomed across the Idaho countryside, a special ceremony was held at the Dobson Classic Auto Restoration and Training Center. The first class of apprentices was graduating, each having completed their restoration projects and demonstrated mastery of the core skills Hank had taught them. The shop was filled with family members, classic car enthusiasts, and representatives from auto shops across the region who had already offered positions to the graduates. Hank, dressed in uncharacteristically formal attire, though he had drawn the line at a tie, stood before the small podium, looking both proud and uncomfortable with the attention. "Never been much for speeches," he began, his voice gruff but clear. "But these 6 young people deserve recognition for what they've accomplished here. They didn't just learn how to fix cars, they learned how to listen to them, how to respect the engineering that went into them, how to preserve history through craftsmanship." He gestured to the row of beautifully restored vehicles parked behind him, the culmination of 6 months of painstaking work. "These machines tell a story about American ingenuity, about design, about a time when things were built to last and to be repaired, not replaced. Thanks to these graduates, those stories will continue." As Hank called each student forward to receive their certification, he added personal comments about their particular strengths and growth. When he reached Maya, his voice softened slightly. Maya Hernandez didn't just master the technical skills, though she did that faster than anyone I've seen. She understood from the beginning what this work is really about: connection. To the past, to the people who built these machines, to the people who drove them, and to the people who will drive them in the future. Maya stepped forward, her eyes bright with emotion, and accepted the certificate and the vintage toolkit that each graduate received, tools that Hank had personally selected for each of them based on their specialties. After the certificates were distributed, Hank cleared his throat. "We have one more announcement today. I'm not getting any younger," he acknowledged, prompting gentle laughter from the audience. "And this program needs someone who can carry it forward for many years to come. I'm pleased to announce that Maya Hernandez has accepted the position of Assistant Director of the training program and will eventually take over as lead instructor." A round of applause filled the shop as Maya, clearly surprised, despite the private conversations that had preceded this moment, returned to the podium to stand beside her mentor. As the formal ceremony concluded and the gathering transitioned to a celebration with food and drinks, a tall figure slipped in through the side entrance, drawing little attention in his simple dark clothing and baseball cap pulled low. Hank spotted him immediately and made his way through the crowd. "Didn't think you'd make it," he said, extending his hand to Keanu Reeves. "Wouldn't miss it," Reeves replied, shaking Hank's hand warmly. His left wrist, now healed from the fracture sustained in the motorcycle accident, bore only the faintest evidence of the injury. The first graduating class is an important milestone. They moved to a quiet corner of the shop, where Reeves could observe the proceedings without drawing attention. "Maya looks happy about her new role," he noted. "She'll do well," Hank said with certainty. "Has the right combination of skill and patience. The students respect her." "And the expansion plans?" Hank nodded toward a set of architectural drawings displayed on a board near the refreshment table. "Breaking ground next month. Second training bay, dedicated restoration space, and a small museum area for displaying student work. Your foundation's board approved everything." "They were impressed by the outcomes from the first class," Reeves said. "All graduates employed, 3 vintage vehicles fully restored and returned to regular use, and inquiries about the program from across the country." Hank allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction. "Not bad for an old man and a bunch of kids." "Not bad at all," Reeves agreed. He hesitated, then added, "I have some news too. Remember that documentary team that asked to film the program back in January? The ones you told to wait until we had some results to show?" Reeves nodded. "They've been given the green light. They want to tell the story of the program, how it came to be, what it's accomplished. If you're comfortable with it, of course." Hank frowned, his natural aversion to publicity surfacing. "Don't much like being on camera." "It's not about us," Reeves explained gently. "It's about the craft, the apprentices, the cars, about preserving something valuable. The producers understand that completely." Hank considered this, watching as the graduates showed their family members the vehicles they had restored, explaining the processes with pride and expertise. These young people had absorbed not just technical skills but a philosophy, one that valued patience, precision, and respect for both materials and history. "I suppose," he finally conceded, "if it helps other places start similar programs, it might be worth the fuss." Reeves smiled, that warm, genuine expression that had become familiar to Hank over the past 9 months of their unlikely friendship. That's exactly what we're hoping for. As the celebration continued around them, Hank Dobson reflected on the journey that had begun with a single car repair, how one chance encounter had blossomed into something that would now touch countless lives and preserve a craft he had spent his lifetime perfecting. The vintage watch on his wrist, a gift from the famous man standing beside him, ticked steadily on, marking not just the passage of time, but the beginning of a legacy that would continue long after both of them were gone. In the hands of Maya and the other graduates, in the meticulous restoration of engines designed decades ago, in the careful transmission of knowledge from one generation to the next, something precious had been saved. And it had all started because an elderly mechanic had simply done what he had always done, fixed a car to the very best of his ability, with honesty, skill, and respect for both the machine and its owner, never imagining that this ordinary act would lead to such an extraordinary outcome.